My name is Claudia, and the Thanksgiving dinner that was meant to celebrate family became the night I was erased. The estate had never looked more magnificent. Chandeliers cast golden light across the polished oak table that stretched nearly the entire length of the dining room. Linen embroidered with golden leaves covered its surface, crystal glasses sparkled in neat rows, and silver utensils gleamed as if they had been placed there for royalty. The smell of roasted turkey, glazed ham, sweet potatoes, and cinnamon pies floated through the air, wrapping the house in false warmth. Guests filled every chair, voices overlapping in a chorus of cheer. At the head of the table sat my husband, Daniel, his shoulders squared, his smile confident, as though he were a king presiding over loyal subjects. To his right sat his sister Cassandra, draped in emerald silk, whispering in his ear and laughing far too loudly at his jokes. Around them gathered cousins, business associates, neighbors, and even a few investors Daniel had been eager to impress. The atmosphere was rich with applause, wine pouring freely, cutlery clinking in steady rhythm. And me? I wasn't invited to the table. When the guests had been called in, Daniel's mother, Eleanor, gently touched my arm with that syrupy sweetness that always masked venom. "Claudia dear, there isn't enough room. Why don't you sit in the kitchen? You'll be more comfortable there." Her words were coated in honey, but I heard the acid beneath them. More comfortable meant less visible. Daniel didn't even look at me as he nodded in agreement. "Yes, it's for the best. We've got clients here. Important people. You'll understand." Understand. That word echoed in my mind as they ushered me toward the kitchen, as though my place at the table was too much to grant, as though I were not a wife but a servant, someone to keep out of sight so Daniel could bask in admiration without distraction. They set a small chair near the counter for me, not even at the small breakfast table in the corner. A chipped plate, a single glass filled with lukewarm water, no linen napkin. A place for a ghost, not a partner. Through the open doorway I could see the dining room. Light spilled toward me like a cruel reminder of what I had been denied. Daniel raised his glass high. "To family, to tradition, to success," he declared, his voice strong, commanding attention. Glasses clinked and Cassandra laughed first, leading the applause. I lifted my chipped glass to my lips, tasting bitterness that had nothing to do with water. Every laugh that followed was a slap across my face. Every cheer was a reminder that, in their eyes, I didn't belong. I wanted to scream, to storm into that room and tell them the truth, that the estate they bragged about would have been lost without me, that the money for the renovations had come from my accounts, that the business Daniel claimed as his triumph had been saved by my father's inheritance, by my sacrifices, not his. But I didn't scream. Instead, I sat in that chair, hands folded, eyes steady, and I smiled. Because while they thought they were humiliating me, they had no idea they were handing me the perfect stage. Silence, I had learned long ago, is not weakness. Silence is a weapon. Daniel had confused my quiet with surrender, but he would learn the truth soon enough. As the feast went on, the waiters brought out endless courses. Trays of roasted vegetables, bowls of cranberry sauce, golden pies, bottles of imported wine. Daniel bragged loudly about the costs, telling his investors, "Nothing but the best for my guests. Only the finest catering." He didn't notice the way the head caterer's eyes flicked toward me in the kitchen doorway, respectful, acknowledging who had truly signed the contracts. No one in that glittering room knew the truth. Every dollar spent that night, every bottle uncorked, every plate served, it had all been charged to me. The catering contract, the wine shipments, even the linens embroidered with golden leaves bore my signature. $250,000 of it. Money Daniel hadn't earned, money Cassandra hadn't lifted a finger to provide. Money his family pretended was his. They thought they had silenced me. They thought pushing me into the kitchen would make me invisible. But invisibility has its advantages. They revealed themselves freely, careless in their arrogance, believing they had already won. And me? I sat quietly, sketching my revenge in the shadows. Because I knew that when the final bill was presented, when Daniel's lies could no longer shield him, the truth would crash through their golden illusions like a storm none of them saw coming. They made me sit in the kitchen. But soon I would make them choke on the cost of their own cruelty. The sound of laughter from the dining room kept spilling into the kitchen long after I had been seated away like a servant. Every toast, every cheer rose and fell like waves, and each one struck me harder than the last. I sat still, my fingers curled around the chipped glass, listening as Daniel's voice grew louder. He wasn't just entertaining his guests. He was rewriting history. Of course, the expansion wouldn't have been possible without my vision, he said, his tone polished, meant to impress the investors seated on either side of him. When the deal almost fell through last spring, I convinced the partners to hold steady. And look where we are now. A portfolio worth millions. The guests clapped. Cassandra leaned closer, her emerald silk sleeve brushing Daniel's. You've always been the clever one, she said, her voice sweet as poison. I nearly choked on my water. That deal hadn't been his victory. I had been the one who rescued it, digging through contracts until 2 a.m, rewriting clauses, renegotiating terms with stubborn partners who trusted me, not him. Daniel had walked into the boardroom and signed his name on work I had already completed. Now he sat there, glass raised high, telling the story as if I had never existed. I pressed my nails into my palm until the sting reminded me to stay calm. Outbursts wouldn't win anything. I needed something sharper. The night dragged on. Plates were cleared, new dishes carried in. Daniel boasted about the estate renovations, claiming he had designed the changes himself. He boasted about his wine cellar, saying it had cost a fortune. He even boasted about Eleanor's support, thanking her for raising him to be a man of vision. Not once did my name cross his lips. And then the moment came. The head caterer entered the dining room quietly, a black folder in his hand. His voice was respectful but firm. Mr. Hale, I'll need a final signature for the balance before my team departs. Daniel took the pen without looking up, signing with a flourish as if sealing another grand deal. He slid the folder back across the table. But the caterer didn't leave. His gaze shifted first to Daniel, then briefly to me sitting in the doorway. Sir, he said carefully, the account on file for this event is not yours. The charge will be processed under Mrs. Claudia Hale. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Forks stopped clattering. Glasses froze halfway to lips. Cassandra's eyes flicked to me, narrowing, calculating. Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. $250,000. That number was not spoken aloud, but everyone knew. It was written in the margins of every whispered rumor about wealth, every assumption about Daniel's success. I rose from my chair, leaving the chipped plate behind. The kitchen felt miles away as I stepped into the dining room. 20 pairs of eyes pinned me in place, waiting. I met Daniel's gaze. His face was flushed, a bead of sweat glistening at his temple. He forced a laugh, raising his glass. Claudia helps with our finances. She doesn't mind. The lie was so transparent it made the room colder. I set my hand on the back of an empty chair. My voice was calm, clear. I manage more than finances. This estate, this dinner, the comfort you all enjoy tonight, it is built on what I provide. My name is on the contracts. My signature is on the accounts. Every toast you've raised tonight is one I paid for. A murmur spread down the table. Some guests lowered their eyes, ashamed. Others looked at Daniel with suspicion. Cassandra's smirk faltered just slightly. Daniel's voice cracked as he snapped, Claudia, sit down. But I didn't. For the first time that evening, I felt taller than the chandelier above them, stronger than the oak table that held their feast. I will, I said softly, but only when you all understand what this night cost. Not just in dollars but in dignity. The caterer cleared his throat, gathering his folder. The silence remained as I returned to the kitchen, but now it belonged to me. Later, when the guests had gone and the house was dark, I walked past Daniel's study. A light glowed beneath the door. Curiosity tugged at me. I pushed it open and froze. Stacks of folders covered his desk. Contracts, bank statements, and something worse. Transfer requests drafted in secret. My name appeared across the top of documents I had never signed. He had been preparing to move funds out of my accounts, little by little, hidden beneath business jargon. The betrayal wasn't just in his laughter or his silence at dinner. It was here, in ink and signatures waiting to be forged. My chest tightened. My hands trembled. But I didn't collapse. I lifted one of the papers, studied it under the lamp's glow, and whispered to the empty room. You thought sitting me in the kitchen was humiliation. You have no idea what humiliation feels like. But you will. Because in that moment, I understood Daniel's arrogance wasn't careless. It was calculated theft, and I would need proof sharp enough to cut through every lie he planned to tell. I could not sleep that night. The image of Daniel's forged paper spread across his desk burned into my eyes every time I closed them. My pulse pounded in my ears. I lay awake, the house quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. At 3 a.m, I rose and padded barefoot back into the study. My hands trembled as I opened drawer after drawer. Inside were contracts, banking statements, drafts of letters to financial institutions. His plan was clear. He intended to siphon money from my accounts into his own ventures, using my name, my identity, my trust as camouflage. I took photographs of everything. My phone clicked softly as I captured page after page. Transfers marked with my name, amounts in the hundreds of thousands, notes scribbled in Daniel's handwriting. Move quietly. Don't alert her yet. Every click steadied me. I created folders on my laptop labeled and dated. One for financial transfers, one for suspicious contracts, one for catering and estate expenses already tied to me. I even created a timeline, mapping each transaction against Daniel's boasts he had made in front of his investors. He was building his empire on foundations I had laid, while trying to erase my signature entirely. By dawn I had enough to know the truth. But evidence was not only papers. I needed witnesses. The first was the caterer. Later that week, I arranged a quiet meeting with him at a small cafe. His eyes flicked nervously around the room, but he nodded when I explained. Yes, Mrs. Hale. The account was yours. I saw your name on every invoice. I can testify to that, if it comes to it. His words steadied me. Someone outside the family had seen the truth. Next, I spoke with Marisol, the housekeeper who had worked in the estate for years. She remembered how Daniel had insisted all invoices be sent to me, but later had asked her to destroy certain receipts. She saved some of them, hidden in an old cookie tin in her room. When she handed them to me, her hands trembled. I knew something was wrong, she whispered. Now you can show the court. Piece by piece the fortress grew. But I still needed strength outside the house. So I called Grace, my oldest friend. She had always warned me that Daniel's charm was a mask. When I told her everything, she was quiet for a long time. Finally she said, Claudia, you can't fight him alone. You need a lawyer who knows how to deal with men like Daniel, men who think the world will always protect them. That was how I met Evelyn Ross. Her office was small, lined with books stacked 2 deep on every shelf. Evelyn was in her 50s, her hair silver at the temples, her eyes sharp as glass. She listened without interruption as I spread the photographs, the receipts, the cookie tin of invoices across her desk. When I finished, she leaned back, folding her hands. You have the beginnings of a case. But listen to me carefully. Daniel will not play fair. Men like him never do. He will twist this until you look like the villain. He will drag your name through mud, call you unstable, accuse you of betrayal. If you want revenge, you must prepare for war. Her words made my throat tighten. Then help me prepare. Evelyn nodded. We start with the paper trail. Financial institutions love clarity. We'll subpoena his drafts. We'll line up your witnesses. And we'll time our strike. If you want him humiliated, it won't just be in court. It will be in front of the very people who toasted him at that Thanksgiving table. A fire lit in my chest. Exposure. Public, undeniable exposure. That was what I wanted. Not whispered apologies. Not quiet settlements. I wanted him to taste the humiliation he had served me with that chipped plate. Back at the estate, I kept my silence. Daniel strutted through the halls as if nothing had changed. He kissed my cheek in the morning, called me darling in front of staff, laughed into late-night phone calls I knew weren't business. He believed I was defeated, that my silence meant surrender. But every night, in the quiet of my study, I added to the binder. More screenshots, more receipts, testimony written in neat lines. My timeline sharpened like a blade. And still something gnawed at me. The catering bill had been the spark, but the documents on his desk suggested more, something bigger. Some accounts were marked not just for transfers but for liquidation. Daniel wasn't simply stealing. He was preparing to collapse the walls around me, to leave me with nothing. I looked at the binder, thick and heavy in my hands. This wasn't just a record. It was a weapon. Because one night as I slipped another receipt into its sleeve, I caught Daniel watching me from the doorway, his smile too calm. "Careful, Claudia," he said softly. "You don't know what fire you're playing with." I did not tell anyone everything. Not yet. Some truths are weapons. They must be used with care. The binder sat heavy on my kitchen table like a sleeping beast. I opened it and let the pages breathe. Receipts. Emails. Photographs. A timeline thick with ink. Each sheet a proof. Each sheet a promise. I needed people who would not be blinded by Daniel's charm. I needed a team that would turn my silence into a siege. First to arrive was Grace. She had been my friend since college. She knew the small details of my life. She knew when to speak and when to hold a hand. She hugged me without questions. "Show me," she said. Her voice was steady. Her eyes were steel. "We will do this together." We went through the binder. I explained the transfers. I explained the forged drafts I had found on Daniel's desk. Grace furrowed her brow. "They will try to paint this as a fight," she said. "You as greedy. You as unstable. You need someone who knows how to make a story simple and true." That someone was Evelyn Ross. I had only met her once in a cafe. Now I needed her full force. Evelyn's office smelled of old paper and coffee. She had a way of sitting that implied patience and hunger all at once. When I laid out the binder, she did not flinch. "This is good," she said. "Very good. But it must be tighter. He will attack your character. He will call you dramatic. He will say you invented documents. We will not let that happen." Her plan was direct. Step 1. Freeze any suspicious accounts. Step 2. Subpoena Daniel's drafts and emails. Step 3. Serve notices to the catering company and to the vendors who had been paid from my name. Step 4. Line up witnesses who would not be swayed by family ties. "There is one more thing," she said. "We need a forensic accountant. Someone who can trace every cent and show it is not yours to spend. We must show motive and method." Evelyn called one she trusted. Within 2 days, Marcus arrived at my door. He was thin and quick. He spoke in numbers and patience. He dove into accounts like a diver into cold water. I watched him work and felt a tide of relief. Marisol, the housekeeper, brought us receipts she had hidden. She had kept them because she felt wrong when Daniel asked her to shred them. Luis, the gardener, agreed to testify about boxes he had seen taken from the study. The caterer gave a written statement. Even a junior accountant at Daniel's firm admitted to seeing papers he should not have seen. We built a list of witnesses. Each one had a detail Daniel had not expected to be exposed. We filed a motion the week after Thanksgiving. Evelyn's language was precise. She asked the court to prevent any asset transfers pending a full review. She requested preservation of documents. She requested a temporary restraining order if Daniel attempted to access accounts or move funds. The judge signed a temporary order within 48 hours. Relief washed over me. For now, the papers would not move. For now, Daniel's pen was restrained. But the temporary reprieve did not mend the raw wound. My parents avoided calls. Daniel smiled too often. Cassandra called me twice. Her voice was syrup and threat. "You should have sat quietly," she said in the first call. It would have been kinder. I recorded the call. Evelyn told me to keep everything. We planned the next move. We would not only stop him. We would disarm him in public. We would not scream. We would show. Evelyn arranged a meeting with a small circle. Marcus the accountant. The caterer. Marisol. Luis. Grace. Me. We sat in a conference room and rehearsed testimony. We practiced pacing and calm. Short sentences. Clear answers. No flare of drama. "Judges do not admire theatrics," Evelyn said. "They respect facts. Give facts. Point to evidence. Let the documents do the yelling." At home I rehearsed again. I read the timeline until the dates felt like rhythm. I memorized the exact words on certain invoices. I learned the name of the offshore account Daniel had used in drafts. I trained my face to be present, not pained. We also built a public frame. If he tried to spin the story into an attack on me, Grace would release a brief statement. Short, firm, true. Mrs. Claudia Hale is the rightful account holder. We are cooperating with authorities. We request privacy. No drama. No speculation. Days thickened into a rigid pattern of filing motions, securing statements, waiting for bank confirmations. And then just when I felt the net tightening around his lies, I saw it. An alert on my phone. A push notification from my bank. My chest clenched and I opened it with hands that trembled. A wire transfer. $250,000. Status. Pending. The destination read like a ghost. An account I did not recognize. A bank in a name that meant nothing to me. The timestamp said it would process in 3 hours. My breath hitched. I felt every second blink loud. I called Evelyn. She answered on the second ring. They cannot, I breathed. They promised. The court signed an order. They cannot move funds. She was silent for a fraction. Then she said, then someone is trying to accelerate before the freeze is registered. Marcus, run the logs. We need to stop this transfer. Now. Marcus's voice came through the line, sharp and quick. I can try to intercept. Call the bank. Demand a hold. I will issue a subpoena. But the transfer may already be in the banking rails. 3 hours felt like an ocean. I looked at the kitchen where I had sat in humiliation only days before. The same room now felt like a command center. My heart pounded against my ribs. I felt both terror and heat. The transfer showed as pending. The court order was in place. Someone was trying to steal $250,000 out of my name before the law could catch them. I pressed my palms flat on the table and whispered to the empty house. If they think they can outrun the truth, they have not met my patience. Then the phone rang. The bank had answered. The voice of the bank clerk was flat, rehearsed, but to me it sounded like salvation. Yes, Mrs. Hale. We see the pending transfer. Our system flagged it because of the restraining order tied to your account. It is currently on hold. Relief flooded through me, but only for a breath. My fingers still shook as I gripped the phone. Can it be cancelled? Only if the rightful owner confirms, the clerk replied. That's you, Mrs. Hale. Do you wish to stop the transfer? Yes, I said firmly. Stop it. Freeze anything that moves without my signature. The line clicked. The order was done. I stared at the quiet kitchen around me, the table scattered with evidence. One battle had been won, but the war had only sharpened. That night, we gathered in Evelyn's office. Grace sat beside me, her hands folded tight. Marcus brought his laptop, wires trailing across the desk. Evelyn paced slowly, her heels clicking against the hardwood. They've escalated, she said simply. And escalation means desperation. That's good. But it also means we can't stay reactive. Claudia, we need to move from defense to attack. I nodded. Then let's attack. Evelyn outlined it in steps, each one a brick in the fortress we were building. Step 1, lock the narrative. Daniel's greatest weapon was charm, the image he spun so easily. At Thanksgiving, he had convinced a room full of people that he was the architect of everything. We would strip that image bare. Grace suggested press timing. A discreet leak to financial reporters, not tabloids, detailing the freeze order. Nothing sensational, just fact. Funds protected, court reviewing contested assets. A paper trail the public could not ignore. Step 2, stack the evidence. Marcus would trace every suspicious transfer. Marisol's saved receipts, the caterer's testimony, even the notes Daniel had scribbled on drafts. We show a pattern, Marcus said. Not a mistake, not confusion, deliberate theft. Step 3, set the trap. Evelyn's eyes were sharp. Claudia, what do you want most? The answer burned in me, clear as fire. I want him humiliated in front of the same people who laughed while I sat in the kitchen. Evelyn smiled. Then we let him walk into his own ruin. He has a gala next month, doesn't he? I blinked. She was right. Daniel had bragged for weeks about the Winter Business Gala, an annual gathering of investors, clients, and society families. He was supposed to give a speech about vision and leadership. That's our stage, Evelyn said. He thinks it's his coronation. We'll make it his collapse. Grace leaned forward. How? By timing, Evelyn replied. The lawsuit, the evidence, the bank freeze, they will all align the week of the gala. If the judge allows filings to become public, Reporters will swarm the event. And if Daniel speaks, he'll choke on his own lies. I sat back, the idea burning into me. A public mirror. He had forced me into the shadows on Thanksgiving. Now he would face the spotlight, but with the truth tearing his mask apart. Still I hesitated. What if the judge sides with him? What if his connections? Evelyn cut me off. Truth has longer legs than charm. His allies can sip wine and gossip, but paper is paper. Contracts don't lie. Grace squeezed my hand. And neither do you. You have us. That night, I returned home with a new binder Evelyn had given me. On the cover she had written in black ink, strategy. Inside were sections divided by colored tabs. Evidence, witnesses, court filings, media contacts. My life reduced to files, but in that structure I found strength. Daniel, oblivious, was on the phone in his study when I passed. His voice was smooth, his laughter easy. He was still pretending the world bent for him. I wondered if he sensed the walls closing in. When he noticed me in the doorway, he smiled as if nothing had shifted. Claudia, don't wait up. Long night of planning. I smiled back, my mask practiced. I know, I whispered. I've been planning too. In bed the silence pressed heavy, but I didn't fear it anymore. Silence was no longer their weapon against me. It was mine against them. I lay awake imagining the gala. Daniel standing tall, Cassandra by his side, Eleanor nodding proudly. Only for the cameras to turn, the whispers to start, the headlines to hit before dessert was served. He thought Thanksgiving had been his triumph. I would make the Winter Gala his reckoning. But plans, no matter how careful, are fragile. And just as I began to believe our counterplan was airtight, Evelyn called with grim news. The judge assigned to our case had a long friendship with Daniel's father. Neutrality was no longer guaranteed. The morning of the hearing felt like walking into a storm. The courthouse loomed with its stone steps and tall columns, as cold and unforgiving as the people who had pushed me into the kitchen on Thanksgiving. I clutched my binder marked strategy so tightly my knuckles whitened. Evelyn walked beside me, calm and collected in her dark suit, her silver hair pulled back. Grace trailed just behind, her eyes sharp, scanning the crowd. Even outside the building, whispers followed us. Reporters had begun circling. My name was on the lips of people who once looked straight through me. Inside the courtroom, the air was heavy with tension. Daniel sat at the opposite table, his arm draped casually along the chair as if he owned the room. Cassandra whispered in his ear, her emerald earrings catching the light, her smirk never wavering. His parents sat just behind him, Eleanor stiff with pride, his father leaning forward with quiet confidence. They looked like royalty waiting to be obeyed. And then the judge entered. My chest tightened. Judge Harrington. I remembered his name from Evelyn's warning. He had been close friends with Daniel's father, attending family functions long before I had entered the Hale world. His gaze flicked toward me, then rested warmly on Daniel. The gavel struck. This court will come to order. Daniel's lawyer rose first, presenting the narrative as smooth as silk. Your Honor, this case is nothing but an overreaction. Mr. Hale has always managed his family's assets responsibly. Any suggestion of impropriety is based on misunderstanding. Thanksgiving finances, catering, minor paperwork. My client has been unfairly portrayed. We ask the court to dismiss this case before it damages his reputation further. The judge nodded slightly, his expression unreadable, but I caught the flicker of familiarity in his eyes when he glanced at Daniel's father. A chill swept over me. Evelyn stood, her voice crisp. Your Honor, we will prove with clear evidence that Mr. Hale attempted to transfer funds without authorization. We will show a pattern of fraudulent drafts, a trail of receipts, and witnesses who can confirm Mrs. Hale is the rightful account holder. I sat, pulse racing, every breath a battle. The session unfolded slowly. Evidence was admitted. The caterer testified that every invoice bore my name, not Daniel's. Marisol spoke quietly about receipts Daniel had asked her to destroy. Marcus the accountant detailed suspicious drafts found on Daniel's desk. Each voice added a brick to the wall of truth. And yet I watched the judge. His face betrayed nothing, but his small gestures told another story. The way he leaned forward at Daniel's lawyer's words, the faint impatience when Evelyn cross-examined. At recess, Evelyn led me and Grace into a side hall. Her face was composed, but her eyes burned. "He's leaning toward them," she said quietly. "I can feel it. The evidence is strong, but personal ties run deep. If Harrington dismisses parts of our claim, Daniel will spin this as vindication." Grace clenched her fists. "So what do we do?" Evelyn's answer was low, deliberate. "We pivot. We can't rely solely on the court. We time the public exposure." My breath caught. "You mean the gala?" "Yes," Evelyn said firmly. "If Harrington won't deliver justice in this room, we make sure Daniel faces it in the one he built for himself. You wanted humiliation? Then the Winter Gala becomes our battlefield." For the first time, I felt my fear twist into something sharper: resolve. I pictured Daniel on stage, bragging as always, the cameras pointed at him, the guests hanging on his every word. And then headlines flashing, whispers spreading, eyes turning on him not with admiration but suspicion. Still doubt not at me. What if the judge rules against us before then? What if Daniel learns we've prepared for the gala? Evelyn's gaze was unflinching. "Then we let him. Because when a man believes he has already won, that's when he's most blind. Let him celebrate. Let him laugh. He'll walk into his own downfall." Grace pressed my hand. "Claudia, this is bigger than family now. This is about showing them you will not be erased." I nodded, my throat tight. The recess ended. As we filed back into the courtroom, Daniel caught my eye. His smirk widened, as if he already sensed Harrington in his pocket. Cassandra leaned close, whispering something that made him chuckle. I sat tall, my binder before me. They thought I was cornered. But I was no longer the woman seated in the kitchen with a chipped plate. I was the woman who would turn their feast into ashes. And as the judge prepared to give his preliminary ruling, the bailiff entered with an envelope. "Your Honor," he said. "Urgent filing received this morning." Daniel's lawyer snatched it with too much eagerness, and when he opened it, his face paled. The Winter Gala shimmered like a jewel box. Crystal chandeliers spilled light over velvet drapes. A string quartet played in the corner, and the city's wealthiest gathered in sequined gowns and black tuxedos. It was Daniel's kingdom, or so he thought. He stood at the center of it all, smiling, shaking hands, Cassandra on his arm. She glittered in emerald again, her favorite color, a reminder of her arrogance. His parents lingered nearby, Eleanor whispering proudly to investors, his father puffing cigars with old friends. And me? I entered quietly, unannounced, in a black gown that seemed to drink the light. Grace walked beside me, steady as ever. Evelyn trailed just behind, a slim leather folder tucked under her arm. The moment we crossed the threshold, heads turned. Whispers rippled. Some guests smiled politely. Others leaned closer to Daniel, murmuring. He froze when he saw me. His smile faltered only for a breath. Then he recovered, raising his glass high as though my presence meant nothing. But his eyes betrayed him. He knew. The night unfolded in slow, deliberate beats. Waiters carried trays of champagne. Laughter echoed across marble floors. Daniel worked the room, but the charm that once seemed effortless now looked forced. His smile was tight, his hands restless. And then the moment arrived. The lights dimmed. The string quartet faded. The host stepped onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Daniel Hale, tonight's speaker on vision and leadership." Applause erupted. Daniel strode forward, his tuxedo crisp, his voice rich as he began. "Thank you, all of you. Tonight is about progress, tradition, and the strength of leadership. None of this would have been possible without dedication, without trust, without the vision to." He paused. A murmur spread through the crowd. Dozens of phones buzzed at once. Heads bent toward glowing screens. Guests whispered sharply, gasps breaking the rhythm. Cameras shifted, reporters scribbling notes. I knew what they were seeing. Evelyn had timed it perfectly. At that very moment, the filings went public. The freeze order, the evidence of attempted transfers, the testimonies lined like dominoes. The headlines flashed across news apps. Daniel Hale under investigation for fraudulent transfers. Court documents reveal assets tied to wife's accounts. Thanksgiving host faces accusations of financial deception. The applause faded into silence. Daniel's voice cracked. "Please, let's not be distracted by rumors. These are baseless. Lies designed to tarnish. But another sound cut him off. A reporter stood near the front, microphone raised. Mr. Hale, how do you respond to documents showing you attempted to move $250,000 without authorization? Cameras flashed. Daniel stammered. His face reddened. He glanced toward Cassandra, who gripped his arm too tightly, her smirk gone. His parents looked frozen, Eleanor's mouth open, his father sinking into his chair. I stepped forward then. The crowd parted without a word. The music had stopped entirely. All eyes fell on me as I climbed the small stage. My heels clicked against the polished floor, each step louder than his entire speech. I faced the room, my voice calm, steady. The truth is simple. The accounts are mine. The funds were mine. The Thanksgiving dinner you toasted was paid with my name. The papers you read tonight are not rumors, they are facts. For years, Daniel claimed my work as his, my inheritance as his success, my silence as his permission. But tonight's silence ends. Gasps rippled again. Reporters scribbled furiously. Daniel lunged toward the microphone. Claudia, stop this madness. I turned, eyes meeting his. For the first time in years he looked small. You stopped me at Thanksgiving, I said, my voice cutting through the room. You put me in the kitchen with a chipped plate while you paraded lies. But tonight I stand at your table. And everyone can see who you really are. The silence that followed was absolute. Cameras clicked, guests whispered, and Daniel's empire collapsed in real time. Evelyn joined me on stage, folder in hand. She held it high. Court filings are public record. Read them yourself. Every transfer, every forgery, every attempt to erase Claudia Hale. It's all here. The crowd erupted. Some guests stood, leaving abruptly. Investors whispered to one another, shaking heads. Reporters shouted questions Daniel could no longer answer. He stood trembling, his hand still gripping the microphone, but no words came. Cassandra's face twisted in fury. Eleanor's shoulders sagged, her pride shattering. And me? I stood tall, the lights warm on my face, the truth finally louder than his lies. Because as the room turned against him, I realized humiliation was only the beginning. Tomorrow would bring consequences Daniel had never imagined. The gala had been designed to showcase Daniel's triumph. Instead, it became his collapse. The ballroom that once glowed with chandeliers now buzzed with whispers like hornets. Guests shifted uneasily in their chairs, some rising to leave, others clustering in small knots to murmur, their eyes darting between me and Daniel. The string quartet sat frozen, instruments lowered, as though music had abandoned the room. Daniel's face was crimson, his tuxedo collar damp with sweat. He gripped the microphone as if it could anchor him, but every word that tumbled out sounded weak, hollow. Please, these accusations, they're misunderstandings, orchestrated to embarrass me. His voice cracked. Reporters surged forward, flashing cameras in his face. Mr. Hale, will you deny the signatures? Mr. Hale, what about the pending wire transfer? Mr. Hale, what about the restraining order? The questions pelted him like stones. He stammered, tried to laugh, tried to wave them away, but the laughter never came. Cassandra tugged at his sleeve, her face pale beneath the emerald sparkle of her gown. Stop talking, she hissed, forgetting the microphone was still live. Her voice echoed across the hall. Gasps rippled. Eleanor, his mother, tried to rise, her pearls trembling around her neck. Enough of this circus, she snapped, her voice brittle. We are a family of dignity. But her words died as the crowd turned on her. Eyes narrowing, whispers growing louder. Investors she had courted for years looked away coldly. One shook his head and walked out, muttering, "No dignity left here." Daniel's father sat slumped, cigar forgotten, staring at the floor as if the ground itself had betrayed him. And me? I didn't need to speak again. The room was speaking for me. The evidence Evelyn had released was spreading like wildfire on every phone. Guests scrolled through documents, reading headlines aloud. Forgery confirmed. Transfers attempted. Wife's inheritance misused. Each line stripped Daniel further. I stepped off the stage, Grace at my side, Evelyn just behind. Guests parted for us without a word. The hush following me like a tide. Some nodded respectfully. Others whispered my name as if finally remembering it. As I passed Daniel, he reached out, his voice low, frantic. Claudia, please. Don't do this. We can fix this together. I stopped just long enough to look him in the eyes. For the first time I saw fear there. Not the fear of losing me, but the fear of being seen. You did this, I said softly. And now you'll live with it. His hand dropped. Outside the ballroom the air was cold, crisp with winter. Reporters swarmed, microphones extended. Mrs. Hale, is it true you paid for the entire Thanksgiving feast? Mrs. Hale, how long have you known about the fraudulent drafts? Mrs. Hale, are you filing for divorce? I kept my chin high. No comment, I said, repeating Evelyn's instructions. Dignity. Silence. Truth was already loud enough without me feeding the fire. Grace slipped her arm through mine, guiding me toward the waiting car. You did it, she whispered. You didn't just win. You ended him. But I knew this was not the end. Inside the ballroom, Daniel still stood at that stage, the camera still flashing, Cassandra still whispering, Eleanor still trembling with shame. His empire was crumbling in real time, but rubble can still cut. That night, as we drove away, my phone buzzed nonstop. Headlines multiplied. Friends sent messages of support. Strangers sent congratulations. But mixed among them were darker notes, anonymous numbers, messages that read, "You ruined him. You'll regret this." I closed my eyes, leaning back in the seat, the city lights flashing past the window. Victory was mine, but it came laced with warning. Because humiliation was only the first wave. The real consequences for Daniel, for his family, and for me, would arrive with the morning sun. Morning light crept through the curtains of my apartment, but peace did not come with it. My phone buzzed relentlessly on the nightstand, each vibration another reminder that the world had seen everything. I finally picked it up. Headlines screamed across every news app. Winter Gala humiliation. Daniel Hale exposed. Fraud allegations rock Hale family empire. Wife's evidence topples prominent businessman. I scrolled through messages. Dozens from acquaintances, colleagues, even distant relatives. Some congratulated me. Some begged for the story. Others sent venom. You've ruined a good man. Family belongs at the table, not in court. But one message froze me. From an unknown number. You've made powerful enemies. Sleep with one eye open. I set the phone down, breathing deeply. The victory was mine, but victory can cut both ways. Grace arrived with coffee and bagels. She dropped them on the counter, eyeing the pile of unread texts. Don't waste energy on their noise, she said. The truth is loud enough. Evelyn called shortly after. Her tone was calm, almost clinical. The filings are moving quickly. The DA's office has contacted me. Daniel may face criminal charges if they prove intent to defraud. As for the estate, the freeze order holds. Nothing moves without your signature now. I thanked her, though my voice trembled. It was real now. Not just humiliation, not just whispers. Legal consequences loomed, and Daniel's empire would not recover easily. By afternoon, the fallout spread wider. Investors withdrew support. Two of Daniel's business partners issued public statements distancing themselves. Cassandra was spotted leaving the city with suitcases, paparazzi following her. Social media buzzed with images of Daniel at the gala, red-faced and stammering, frozen mid-collapse. And then as dusk fell, came the knock on my door. I opened it cautiously, and there he stood. Daniel. The man who had once been my husband, who had laughed while I sat in the kitchen, who had forged drafts to steal from me, now stood on my doorstep, hollow-eyed. His tuxedo was gone, replaced by wrinkled clothes. His face was drawn, his shoulders slumped. Claudia, he said quietly. His voice carried none of the confidence it once had. Please. We need to talk. I didn't move aside. About what? How you planned to erase me. How you humiliated me in front of everyone. He swallowed hard. I was wrong. I lost control. Cassandra pushed me, my parents pressured me. But I see it now, I need you. We can fix this together. Please. Just give me a chance. The audacity of it made my chest tighten. A man who had stolen my voice, my money, my dignity, now begging for mercy. Grace appeared in the hallway, her eyes sharp. You should leave, she said coldly. But I lifted a hand, stopping her. No. I want to hear him. Daniel's eyes glistened, his mask shattered. Claudia, without you I have nothing. The accounts are frozen, the partners are gone. Cassandra has abandoned me. But if you stand with me, we can rebuild. They'll listen if you're by my side. Please. I'm begging you. I studied him, letting the silence stretch. For years I had been the silent one, erased by his arrogance. Now silence was power. Finally I spoke. You had your chance, Daniel. Every dinner, every deal, every moment I saved you from yourself. And you repaid me with betrayal. The world has finally seen the truth. I don't intend to help you hide it again. His face crumpled. For the first time, Daniel looked not like a king, not like a husband, but like a child stripped of his illusions. Claudia, please. I closed the door. The sound of it shutting was louder than any applause, heavier than any gavel. Inside, Grace placed a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing. I nodded, though my chest ached. Revenge had been served. Justice was unfolding. But endings are never clean. Pieces of the life I once knew still lingered like shards of glass, sharp enough to cut if I wasn't careful. Because as I leaned against the door, catching my breath, my phone buzzed again. This time with an email from the district attorney. The subject line read, "Criminal proceedings. You will be summoned to testify." The summons from the district attorney came just as Evelyn predicted. Within weeks, I found myself once again in a courtroom, but this time not as a petitioner desperate for protection. This time I was a witness. The case against Daniel unfolded with brutal clarity. Marcus, the forensic accountant, traced every attempted transfer, every draft Daniel had prepared in secret. The caterer testified again, firm in his statement that the Thanksgiving feast was billed solely to me. Marisol described the receipts she had hidden, her courage steady despite the tension in the room. Even one of Daniel's junior associates testified that he had been asked to prepare alternative signatures for documents that never should have existed. Daniel sat at the defense table, pale, hollow-eyed, his once practiced smile long gone. Cassandra had disappeared completely, reportedly to Europe, though no one seemed to care. His parents sat in the back row, Eleanor's pearls hanging loose on her chest, his father staring at the floor as if hoping it might open and swallow him whole. The judge this time was not Harrington. Neutral, firm, and unswayed by the Hale family name, she listened to every piece of evidence with care. When she delivered her decision, her words were sharp as glass. Fraudulent intent is clear. The defendant acted to enrich himself through deception, using accounts and assets not his own. The evidence is overwhelming. Mr. Hale, you stand disgraced before this court, and the law will now take its course. The gavel struck. The sound echoed through the courtroom like thunder. And me? I sat straighter than I had in years. The chipped plate, the whispered laughter, the years of erasure. All of it collapsed into that single moment of vindication. Afterward, as I stepped outside, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. Microphones were thrust in my face. Mrs. Hale, do you feel justice has been served? Mrs. Hale, what's next for you? I kept my voice calm, my words measured. Justice is never easy, but truth always finds its way. Grace stood at my side, Evelyn behind me, steady as stone. The world might still whisper, but the weight on my chest had lifted. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding. Not the marriage, not the image Daniel had stolen, but myself. I restored the estate gardens, letting roses bloom again where silence had once suffocated me. I donated part of my inheritance to shelters for women who had been erased in their own ways, women told they had no place at the table. I began writing, documenting not just my story but others like it. Daniel's name faded from headlines, replaced by new scandals. His empire crumbled. His allies abandoned him. Without Cassandra, without investors, without me, he became a shadow of the man he had pretended to be. One evening, months later, I sat in the same kitchen where I had once been forced to eat alone. This time I set a full plate at the table, candles flickering, Grace and Marisol joining me. We laughed, ate, and celebrated not Thanksgiving but survival. The chipped glass still sat in the cupboard. I left it there as a reminder, not of humiliation but of how far I had come. If you are listening to my story, let me tell you this. Betrayal can come from the people you trust most. Sometimes it isn't shouted. It's whispered in rooms where you're not invited, signed in papers you never see, hidden behind charm that dazzles others. But silence does not mean surrender. Patience does not mean weakness. When you carry truth, You carry a weapon stronger than lies. My husband thought he could erase me, that he could spend my money, steal my name and leave me with nothing. He thought forcing me into the kitchen would end my voice. Instead, it began my revenge. At Thanksgiving, they laughed while I sat with a chipped plate. But in court, in headlines, in every room where truth was spoken, I stood tall. And the world saw them for who they were. My name is Claudia. I am no longer silent. And if you have ever been pushed aside, told you are nothing, remember this. You are not powerless. You are not invisible. The day will come when the truth is yours to wield. Subscribe if you believe every betrayal deserves justice. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that silence can be turned into strength. And never forget, revenge is not always rage. Sometimes it is patience. Sometimes it is law. And sometimes it is as simple as letting the bill arrive with your name at the bottom.